I didn't hear the door close. That's the part that bothers me the most. I didn't hear her footsteps. I didn't hear keys jingling. No, I love you. No dramatic exit. Not even the quiet creak of the front door swinging shut. One moment she was in the kitchen, barefoot, eating dry cereal straight from the box, and the next, she was gone. No call, no text, no explanation. Just her purse on the counter, her phone in the sink, and a yellow sticky note on my laptop that said, "Enjoy the party." That was 2 years ago. It wasn't even my party. Let me explain. My name's Dean, and if I sound bitter, it's because I probably am. I didn't grow up dreaming about white picket fences or a soulmate. I just wanted someone who stayed. Someone who didn't look for exits the second real life kicked in. I thought Avery was that person. But that night proved me wrong. It was supposed to be our night. A quiet Friday. Homemade nachos, board games, maybe one of those documentaries about haunted forests that she loved for no reason. I had just finished grading a stack of freshman essays when she tossed me a hoodie and said, "We're going out." I looked up like an idiot and said, "Out where?" She smirked. "Just trust me." 30 minutes later, we were in the middle of a loud, strobe-lit warehouse party on the east side of town. It was packed, wall to wall with strangers, smoke machines, and sweat. Not my scene. Not even close. She disappeared into the crowd within 5 minutes. I stood by the wall, clutching a plastic cup of lukewarm soda like it was a weapon. I scanned for her every few seconds, hoping she'd wave or gesture me over. But she never did. The only time I caught a glimpse of her, she was on the balcony, laughing with some guy I didn't recognize. Her hand was on his chest. His lips were close to her ear. I didn't make a scene, didn't storm out, didn't pull her aside and ask questions. Instead, I Ubered home alone. When I walked in, her shoes were still by the door. Her cereal bowl was in the sink. The TV was on pause from where we'd left off earlier that afternoon. And then I saw the sticky note. That smug little note. "Enjoy the party." That was the moment I stopped being the guy who forgave everything. That night, I made a choice. No texts, no arguments, no emotional labor. I just unplugged. I ghosted her before she could ghost me. I blocked her number, deleted my socials, quit my job at the college, left town, bought a used truck, rented a studio apartment up north, and buried myself in freelance editing and peanut butter sandwiches. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, and no one left notes anymore. Until this morning. There was a knock at my door, 3 soft taps. I thought it was a package delivery. It was Avery. She looked thinner, older, sadder, but it was her. And in her hands, that same sticky note. For a few long seconds, neither of us said anything. She stood there in her oversized coat, soaked from rain, like some twisted version of a movie scene that should have ended with violins. But there was no music. Just the wind, the soft rumble of my fridge inside, and my pulse hammering in my ears like I was 17 again and about to get dumped in a high school hallway. She looked thinner, not unhealthy, just deflated. Her eyes were sunken a bit deeper, her lips cracked in places I didn't remember. She had always carried this impossible kind of beauty, but now there was something hollow behind it. And for the life of me, I couldn't decide if I felt sorry or angry. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. Her voice cracked at the end. That used to happen when she got really emotional, usually after watching rescue dog commercials or when her favorite fictional character died. Now it was happening on my porch, and I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I didn't answer. I didn't step aside. I just stared at the yellow sticky note in her hand, the same one I'd found 2 years ago, now slightly wrinkled and faded, as if she'd been carrying it with her for far too long. She held it out like a peace offering, and when I didn't move, she lowered it slowly, her shoulders dropping along with it. Then she asked it, the question I never expected. "Do you still have the letter?" I blinked. The letter? I almost said no on reflex, just to cut the moment short. But the problem was, I did. I had it the whole time. That sealed envelope she left inside her dresser drawer, the one I found the day after she vanished. I'd stuffed it into a copy of Leaves of Grass and never opened it. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of still caring. And yet, I kept it. Like an idiot, I kept it. "What's in it?" I asked flatly, still standing in the doorway. Avery looked away. "I was hoping you'd read it. Back then. But I figured you didn't. You would have called me if you had." That irritated me. You left without saying goodbye and expected me to chase you down because of some letter? I didn't expect anything, she said. But I hoped. I should have closed the door right there. I should have shut it gently, walked back to my desk, and returned to the half-finished client manuscript about gardening in northern climates. But I didn't. I stepped back. Just one step. Not an invitation, just hesitation. She took it as permission. She walked inside. And the moment she did, I noticed it, something I didn't catch before. There was someone waiting in the car. Not driving off. Not leaving. Just sitting. Headlights still on. Engine running. Watching the front door. When she stepped inside, the first thing she did was glance around like she didn't believe it was real, like she was walking through a memory that had aged differently than she had. My little studio wasn't much: second-hand couch, desk buried in papers, a microwave that hums like a lawnmower. It smelled faintly of coffee and detergent. Nothing about it screamed home, but after 2 years, it had become my fortress, and now she was standing right in the middle of it. She ran her fingers along the bookshelf, stopping exactly where she used to leave her sketches tucked between my novels. For a second, she almost smiled, like muscle memory tried to trick her into pretending we were still fine. But then she saw it. The book, Leaves of Grass. The old, faded paperback sitting on the shelf, swollen at the spine from where an envelope was wedged inside. Her eyes locked on it immediately. She didn't have to say a word. "You kept it," she whispered. "I don't throw things away," I said. My voice came out colder than I intended. She nodded slowly, biting her lip. "Can I see it?" I hesitated. I had thought about that envelope more times than I'd ever admit. I used to take it out sometimes late at night, run my thumb along the edge, and wonder if opening it would make me feel better or worse. I never did, because not knowing felt safer. Curiosity hurts less than truth. But now she was standing here, asking for it, and that curiosity felt like poison in my veins. I handed it to her. Still sealed, yellowed a bit at the corners. Her name, Avery, written on the back in my handwriting, because I used that envelope for something else years ago, before she left. Somehow that felt cruelly symbolic. She stared at it like it might explode. Then she said quietly, "You never read it." "No," I replied. "You earned that." For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. The rain outside pattered against the window, a sound that suddenly felt louder than it should have been. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something else, a photo. It was a picture of us, taken at that same warehouse party she dragged me to, the night she disappeared. We were laughing. She had her hand on my chest, my arm around her waist. It looked happy, too happy. And then I noticed something behind us in the picture, a reflection in the glass. A man, staring directly at us. My throat tightened. "Who was that?" Her hands trembled slightly. "That's why I left." I blinked, confused. "Because of some guy in a reflection?" She nodded, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Dean, that man isn't a stranger. He's the one in the car." I turned toward the window. The car was still there, idling in the rain, headlights beaming through the mist. The figure behind the wheel hadn't moved. "Why is he here?" I asked slowly. Avery didn't answer. She just pressed the unopened letter into my chest and said, almost pleading, "Because he's the reason I couldn't stay. And now he knows you never read this." Her eyes glistened, terrified. And before I could ask another question, there was a soft knock on the door. 3 taps. Same rhythm as before. I didn't move. I couldn't. Something about those 3 knocks froze me. They weren't aggressive, not loud or frantic, but deliberate, measured. Like whoever stood on the other side of that door wasn't in a hurry, because they already knew what came next. Avery's eyes darted to the sound, then to me. Her hand clenched around the envelope she had just pressed into my chest, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked completely unguarded. Not sad, not tired, afraid. "Don't open it," she whispered. At first I thought she meant the letter, but her eyes were fixed on the door. "I need you to trust me," she said again, barely above a breath. "Just this once. Please don't open that door." I stared at her, heart thudding, trying to piece together how we had gotten from cereal in the sink and a sticky note to this. The man in the car. The photo. The way she vanished 2 years ago without a goodbye. It wasn't adding up, and it was starting to feel like it never would. Another knock. This time just 2 taps. Slower. Still calm. I turned back toward her and asked, "Who is he, Avery?" She hesitated. Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked like someone running through a dozen different versions of the truth, trying to choose the one that might hurt the least. You remember that weekend I left? The party? She said, voice hollow. What I didn't tell you is, that party wasn't the only place I went that night. She took a deep breath and looked toward the floor. I got a message that afternoon. From a number I didn't recognize. It just said, we need to talk. It's about Dean. It's urgent. I thought maybe it was one of your students, or your brother, or even your dad. I didn't know. She paused. Her fingers trembled again. But it wasn't someone from your past, Dean. It was someone from mine. Someone I thought I had left behind for good. The door handle jiggled slightly. Not turning. Just a test. A reminder that he was still there. I stepped toward it, feeling heat rise in my chest. Is he dangerous? I don't know what he is anymore, she said. But I know he's not here for a conversation. And the letter? I asked, glancing down at the still unopened envelope in my hand. Does it explain all this? She nodded once. Every word. But I didn't think you'd still have it. I stared at the paper in my hand. Something about the weight of it felt different now, like it held a version of my life I'd never seen. A secret history written without my knowledge or consent. I didn't know whether to feel betrayed or validated. I could hear my heartbeat. I could hear the rain. And I could hear the man outside shifting his weight on the porch, like he knew the exact moment was coming. Then Avery said something that nearly made my knees give out. He was there before I met you. Long before. And I thought I escaped him. But that night at the party, when I saw him watching us through the glass, I knew he'd found me again. I swallowed hard. So why come back now? She looked up at me, eyes glassy. Because this time, he's not after me. A pause. She let the weight of that land. He's after you. I didn't open the door that night. Not out of fear. Though I'd be lying if I said my hands weren't shaking, but because everything in Avery's face told me that doing so would break something I couldn't put back. So I waited. Listened. The man didn't knock again. No threats. No shouting. Just the heavy silence of someone waiting to be let in, not someone trying to force their way through. Eventually, the car pulled away. No screeching tires, no dramatic exit. Just a slow, casual retreat into the dark, like he'd made his point and would return when he pleased. But the moment he was gone, I turned back to Avery and said what I'd been holding in all night. I deserve to know the truth. No more hints, no riddles. No letters, no metaphors. Talk to me like I matter. Or walk back into that rain. She sat down on the edge of my couch, hugging her arms to her chest like she was trying to fold herself into something smaller. I'd never seen her like this. Not even during our fights. And we had some good ones back then, believe me. But this was different. This was someone unraveling in real time. You were a detour, she said finally. The words hit me like a slap I didn't see coming. I blinked. Excuse me. I don't mean that cruelly. I mean, I needed to get away from my life. From him. I needed something real. And you were the only real thing I'd known in years. You were quiet, safe, kind. You didn't ask too many questions. You didn't pry. You thought I was just a little messy, a little unpredictable, but underneath it all, you thought I was honest. She laughed bitterly. And maybe I was. For a while. I sat down slowly across from her, trying to keep my breath steady. Who is he? She didn't answer at first. Just stared at the floor. He was someone I dated in college. Older. Connected. The kind of guy who made you feel special by making you feel small. He was dangerous, Dean. But I didn't know that until I tried to leave him. The week I moved in with you. That wasn't just a move. It was an escape. I changed my number. My email. I even pretended to have a new last name. She finally looked up at me, and something in her eyes made my stomach turn. He found me anyway. I stood up, pacing now. You should have told me. You should have given me a chance to help you. Instead, you vanished without a word. I was protecting you, she said. And I failed. I shook my head. You don't get to decide what kind of risk I take. You don't vanish and leave a cryptic note and expect me to thank you for your silence. I left the letter, she reminded me softly. That's not the same, Avery. That's not real. Then, as if summoned by fate or some sick sense of irony, my phone vibrated on the table. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something about the moment, the quiet, the unfinished conversation, the memory of that man's silhouette in the car, compelled me. I picked it up and said, hello. A deep voice replied. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous not in tone, but in precision. Dean Fisher. Age 32. Born in Lansing. Used to teach creative writing before switching to remote freelance work. rents a cabin behind a blueberry farm, spends Tuesday nights watching reruns of documentaries you pretend are for research but are really just to feel something. I froze. I know you, the man continued. Better than you know her. I said nothing. He hung up. I looked at Avery. She looked at me. And then we both looked at the letter again. Still sealed. Still sitting on the edge of the bookshelf like a dare. For hours after that phone call, neither of us said much. The silence stretched and folded itself into the corners of my apartment, becoming the third presence in the room. I sat at my desk pretending to work, fingers frozen over the keyboard, eyes locked on the unopened letter across the table. Avery paced slowly, her arms crossed tight like she was holding herself together by force. Every now and then, she'd glance at the door as if she expected it to knock again. It didn't. I should have opened the letter the moment she returned. I should have ripped it open in anger 2 years ago. But part of me, the coward part, the part that preferred uncertainty to pain, never had the guts. Now I did. Or maybe I just had nothing left to lose. I picked it up. The paper felt brittle. It wasn't heavy, but it somehow carried weight. Avery didn't try to stop me this time. She watched, quietly, as I peeled the seal. There was no greeting. No "Dear Dean." No emotional breakdown. No ink-stained tears. Just a page torn from a notebook, scribbled in her rushed, sharp handwriting. It was numbers, street names, specific dates. Some crossed out, some circled. There were arrows, symbols I didn't recognize, and in the top right corner, a single word. Run. I blinked. Flipped the paper over. Nothing on the back. What the hell is this? I asked, looking up at her. Avery sat down, hard, like her legs had stopped working. It's the only thing I could give you without putting you in more danger. This isn't a letter, I snapped. It's a damn puzzle. It's a map, she said quietly, of everywhere I saw him. I stood there stunned, scanning the page again. One of the addresses on it was my old apartment. Another, the coffee shop where I used to grade student essays. Even the bookstore I went to every Thursday night without fail. All these places, all tracked, logged, as if someone had been tracing my steps long before I knew he existed. You knew he was watching me back then? I asked, my voice hollow. She nodded. And you still let me walk around like I was safe? I didn't have a choice, she said, barely audible. He told me that if I warned you directly, he'd hurt you. If I ran, he'd come after you instead. The only thing I could do was disappear. Pretend I didn't care. Pretend you never mattered. That was the only way to make him stop following you. But he didn't stop, Avery, I said. He's still watching. He called me tonight. I know, she said, eyes wide and wet. Because I stopped hiding 3 weeks ago. I stared at her. Why? Because I thought maybe, finally, you were safe. I thought he'd moved on. I thought he was done punishing me for leaving him. Her voice cracked. But then I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. You, sleeping in your truck. It was taken 3 days earlier. She buried her face in her hands. That's when I knew it was never about me. It was always about who I ran to. I sank into the chair, the map still open in front of me, the ink blurring just slightly from my damp fingertips. This doesn't make sense, I murmured. Why wait 2 years just to come back and scare us both again? Avery's eyes locked on mine. Because he's not trying to scare us anymore, she said. He's trying to finish something. There was another knock. Not on the door this time. On the window. The knock on the window wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate tap. But it froze every molecule in the room. Avery didn't move. I didn't breathe. My eyes snapped toward the glass, half expecting to see a shadow, a blurred figure, some vague outline in the rain. But what I saw made the air go thin in my lungs. It was me. Or at least, it looked like me. Same posture. Same jacket I'd lost over a year ago. Same half-scowl I made when I was tired of pretending I wasn't afraid. He stood outside in the rain, his face just visible through the fogged pane, tilted slightly like he was studying me back. Not angry. Not wild. Just curious. I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. Avery gasped, reaching for me as I backed away. What the hell is this? I said, voice rising. She didn't answer. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I'm not. I don't. That's not possible, I stammered. But he was still there. Still watching. Still me. Avery finally whispered. That's not him. That's you. My hands shook. What the hell does that mean? She hesitated, then looked down at the crumpled map in my hand. The places I marked. They weren't just where he watched you. They were also where I watched him watching you. What are you saying? I snapped. I'm saying, she swallowed. There were two of you. Two people who moved the same. Wore the same clothes. Went to the same places. But only one of them came home to me. My heart was a drum in my ears. You think I have a twin? She shook her head slowly. No. I think someone's been pretending to be you for a long time. Maybe longer than we've known. Maybe even before we met. I laughed, but it came out broken and humorless. That's insane. Then how do you explain this? She said, dragging me toward the desk drawer. She pulled it open and took out something I hadn't touched in years, my old journal. One I used to write in during the early days of our relationship. I hadn't opened it since she left. She flipped to a page I didn't remember writing. Dated 1 week before she disappeared. I'm not me anymore. But I'm better at being me than he is. I blinked. That's not my handwriting. Yes, it is, she said. But you didn't write it. I felt dizzy, like the floor had shifted an inch beneath me. I turned back to the window. The man was gone. Avery backed away from the glass, whispering. He's not going to knock again. What does he want? I asked, barely hearing my own voice. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. Not the fear of a man, but of something deeper. Something existential. She whispered, he wants your place back. The next few hours passed like a fever dream. I didn't sleep. Avery didn't either. We sat in silence, watching the shadows crawl across the floor, listening for footsteps that never came. I kept staring at the window where he had stood, half expecting his face to press against the glass again. But he didn't come back. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not the one after that. And yet, something had shifted inside me. Permanently. I wasn't scared anymore. Not in the way I had been. I wasn't just the man Avery left behind. The man who retreated to solitude and convinced himself that silence was safety. I had questions now. Fire. I wanted truth, not just distance. So I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I drove home. Not to the cabin, but to the place I used to live. The one I thought I'd left behind forever. The landlord had a new tenant, but when I explained who I was, he let me inside. I walked through the rooms like I was walking through someone else's memories. And in a way I was. There were notes tucked behind furniture, reminders in my handwriting I didn't remember writing, photos in the attic of me in places I had never been, my own signature on a rental agreement in another city I'd never visited. It was like pieces of a life I hadn't lived were scattered everywhere, deliberately placed to make me question myself, to make me doubt what was real. But then I remembered something Avery said. He wants your place back. Not a place. Not a house. My place. My identity. He had tried to become me, by making me believe I wasn't myself. But now, I was done running. 2 nights later, I saw him again. Not at the window. Not outside my house. But in town. Broad daylight. Standing by a bus stop across from the cafe I used to write in. Same face. Same posture. But he didn't run. He just stared, like he was daring me to cross the street. So I did. I walked right up to him. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice calm. I know what you are. He smiled. But this time, it wasn't smug. It was sad. Like a ghost realizing it's been seen. You were never supposed to look this close, he said. You don't get to write my story anymore, I replied. I do. He didn't answer. He just nodded, as if accepting defeat. Then he stepped back into the crowd and vanished. Not dramatically, not like in the movies. Just gone. As if he'd never been there at all. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe he was never a man. Maybe he was a metaphor I clung to because it was easier than facing my pain. The personification of everything I lost. Every moment I was too afraid to fight for myself. I don't know. And maybe I don't need to. Because when I got home that night, Avery was still there. Sitting on the porch. Waiting. She looked up at me. Not with guilt. Not with apology. But with hope. I'm not running anymore, she said. Neither am I replied. It wasn't some movie ending. We didn't kiss under the rain. But we made tea. Sat in silence. Talked. Really talked. For the first time in years, there were no masks, no lies, no versions of us that didn't exist. Just the truth. And sometimes, that's the happiest ending you can ask for.